The sun has left and forgotten.
Your stories don't define you, but how you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker at Elkins Consulting. Whether you're sharing business stories or personal stories, the stories you share and how you share them make a difference in how you experience yourself and how others perceive you. And there's no better example of that than TEDx events. We are stopped for a moment in time in our lives when we speak on the TEDx stage. And for many years afterward, this is how people will know us, from this one moment in time. I am honored to be speaking at the TEDx U Street Women's stage on November 3rd in 2025. And because of this experience of applying for, submitting my idea, and then going for live auditions twice in Washington, D.C. from Montana, surprise, surprise, I've met some amazing people along the way. And listeners, as you know, I love to invite people to be on my podcast that have just a moment of inspiration for me in a very short conversation. And today is no exception. I met Lindsey A. Lee at the TEDx U Street Women finals when I was selected along with the man that she's dating. He goes by the name Cootie Mack, and we will link to his LinkedIn in the show notes associated with this podcast. But when I finished my speech and all 10 of us did our 3-minute pitch, I was walking through the room. People were stopping me to tell me why my pitch mattered to them. And I saw one woman sitting there by herself, and I had to sit down next to her because when I gave my pitch, she's the one I was speaking to. If you've stood in front of a group of people and had a moment where you connected with somebody in the audience that gave you the strength and inspiration you needed to really own your message, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And Lindsey was my person. So, listeners, you are in for a treat because she is way more than I could have ever anticipated when I sat in that chair next to her. Lindsey, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me here. And let me just say, you drew me in that day. You completely, your energy, your story, that you are a storyteller, you completely drew me in. So you were meant to be where you were in that moment. And I was floored. You're phenomenal.
Thank you. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to be on the stage in November for the official TEDx U Street Women. But in the meantime, I have this opportunity to hear your stories. And as you know, our personal stories can make a really big difference in how we connect and how we build our communities. So we'll start with the standard question that I love to ask my guests because it gives our listeners a different piece of information, more context for what they're going to hear later in our conversation. But after that, I definitely want to start talking about how we build community, particularly around things that matter to us. And you're doing that with your new book, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful book. So you know this because you've listened to some episodes of the podcast. Tell us something about yourself that most people might not know about you.
So I had to think deep on this question. This is a hard question, Sarah. This is because I want to be completely honest and transparent. And I wanted to, I wanted to make sure whatever I said was a true and real answer. So I had to meditate on this question, knowing that I was going to be speaking with you today. And my answer is something that people or most people don't know is that my greatest performance was pretending to be okay. I spent years perfecting the role of the strong, put together woman because I didn't think that there was space for anything else. And this stemmed, I think, from childhood. Growing up, I was always told I was too emotional, too sensitive. But the truth is, there was emotion in my household. It just didn't look like mine. It looked like yelling, tension, or shutdowns. And so I learned early that my kind of expression, which looked like softness and vulnerability, tears, it wasn't really welcome. So I learned to shrink those parts of myself and survive just by excelling instead. And so that's where the performance began, right? I became an overachiever. I graduated high school, stacked degrees, earned every title, every certification. I believed that if I could just do enough, be enough, achieve enough, I would finally feel worthy, get that validation, and maybe I would finally feel safe, right? And I built I built a life around that, nonstop pushing, always proving. I think my ex-husband, I remember he had a name for me. He called me Corporate Lindsey. And she was the one who could, I know, right? Oh, you came from that background, but you know it, right? You came from that background. She was the one who could walk into any room, take control, be calm, be composed, be unshakable. But
I have to interrupt you just for 1 second because my formative years were the 80s. And if somebody had called me Corporate Sarah between 18 and 30, I would have celebrated that cringeworthy title.
Right.
So keep going.
You did
I just want to make sure I want to own this because there are other people out there, especially women, that at one point, and maybe even still, they believe that Corporate Lindsey or Corporate Sarah is a worthy title.
Absolutely.
And now I look at corporate women and I'm like, oh, hell no.
And I embodied that energy, right? High heeled shoes, suits or what have you, walking into a room with confidence, spine straight, head high. And my ex-husband, he benefited from that too, because behind closed doors, our marriage was that same chaos I grew up in. And walking out the door, you would never know that because the image that we portrayed was perfect, right? So behind that version of me was somebody deeply afraid to be fully seen. Someone who had never been taught how to be without constantly doing, moving, going. And it wasn't until after my divorce that I started doing the deep work to unravel the belief that softness did equal, that softness equaled weakness. And I realized that being strong didn't necessarily mean carrying everything alone. It meant that the parts of me that were buried were actually the keys to healing. And so that's kind of, that's where I am now. That's what manifested the book. That's what manifested the softness and the peace that I exist in now,
Mm-hmm. And listeners, if you could just sit with Lindsey just for 2.5 minutes, which is probably as much time as we sat together, you would feel that wave of peace and calm. And I'm sure it's not 100%. None of us have that we are not fully healed, period. Like we will continually be healing and working on ourselves. But in that moment that we shared, that was what I received.
I'm appreciative of you saying that. Because, don't we all want to show up like that to someone else? Just be a place of calming energy and peace. And that's just kind of how I want to live now. I'm not always peaceful. Give me that.
Oh, tell me about it.
I could be a ball. I could be a tornado. But what I want to come home to, my space, my energy. I don't ever want to be the chaos that I was in before. And I don't want to be that for anybody else. And so that's my goal with women, is to support them in unlearning performance, because that's what we're doing. We're performing in our perfectionism. We're performing in the emotional suppression, where it's me learning to return, teach others and teaching myself to return to the fullness of who I am, and letting go of who we're taught to be rather than who we actually are,
So, I can feel what you're saying, because I think many of us go through that, putting on an identity, trying on a variety of identities, finding the one that seems to work for everybody around us before we start to embrace our own, which I find particularly among women that it starts in the late 30s, like 37, 38, and into our 40s, we start to really shed those performance personas, right? And we start to really embrace all aspects of ourselves if we're doing it right, as far as I can tell. And it's hard because our 40s are filled with grief. We are shedding relationships that no longer work for us. And we are unzipping this cocoon that we built that was really safe or felt safe. It wasn't, but it felt really safe because it was dark and cushiony and a little warm. But suddenly we're outgrowing it and we start to unzip it and we start to see our colors. And some of those people that have been around for years, they don't want to see those colors. They want you to stay the way they know you. And they're like, oh, honey, put those colors away. Those don't belong out here. And you can't anymore once you've seen them. So when you think about a moment where you started to see your colors and somebody close to you that you love and that you believe loves you, even now, because it's uncomfortable to see our loved ones uncomfortable, right? When was that moment when you started to see your colors and started to realize this is actually me?
Oh my God. What you said is so impactful, because we're kind of the protagonist in our own story all the time. We're the hero. We're the heroine.
We're also the villain, though.
Yes, we're the villain too. We could be antagonists too. And we create. We're living this storyline out our entire life. We create everybody. Everybody gets to be in our story. And what we don't realize is that we are creating a storyline around the people that are in the stories with us, the same way that people are creating storylines about us. So when folks put us in these roles, they only see us one way. And our parents can see us a certain way, right? From the time that you're a child, your parent can tell you, oh, you're going to be a dancer when you grow up, or she's kind of lazy. And so that sticks on you. And you allow it to stick on you for the rest of your life. For me, that impactful moment, I mean, a lot of us that have dealt with the demise of relationships and divorce, that's such a pivotal moment. I was married 12, 13 years, I have two beautiful children. We'd known each other since high school. So this was a long relationship. I had only known myself as being married, and I did not want to be divorced. I did not want to be known as somebody who
you don't want to own that label.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I didn't want to be a failure because divorce was failure, right? That was the perfectionist going through a divorce, right, and letting people see that I failed in my marriage. And not only did I fail, I failed big. Like, our marriage was, ugh, and he, my ex-husband, he's very honest about this. He's a podcaster. So he'll go on and say these things. He was a serial cheater. He was always adultery. So it was just ugly. I had women contacting me regularly. So it was very ugly. So to have this failure and to be seen as this, and to allow myself, I fought to keep a marriage, knowing how chaotic it was, knowing what I was sitting in, because I didn't want to be a failure. And now looking back at it,
and it's familiar.
Like, yeah,
right?
It's like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean?
Right.
You'd rather live in chaos and, live in this energy than just be. Just be. And I knew I could do it on my own because I was doing it on my own before I got married. So it wasn't a matter of being afraid to be free, being afraid to be a parent on my own. I knew he was going to be a great dad, but it was just the fear of being seen as something different than I wanted to be seen as. It was the fear of my parents knowing what my parents now seeing me. Our friends who knew us since high school now seeing that we were divorced. Oh, that was heavy, during that time. It took me probably I think I deleted everybody off Facebook and,
yeah.
It took me maybe 3-4 years to really be honest about it and just say, you know what? Okay, fine. It's okay to tell people that I'm divorced now. I didn't tell anybody that we were, we had separated or we were going through a divorce. I just kept it under my belt and just was secretive about it as we went through that process. And in doing so, that was detrimental because I dealt with depression on my own.
Right. You didn't build the community you needed.
Absolutely.
Which you can only do if you're contributing to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're spot on. Mm-hmm.
So what was a moment where you looked at your colors and went, oh, I like this?
My gosh. I think it was post-pandemic.
Okay.
That was the first time that I was forced to sit down. We go back to the being a perfectionist, dealing with performance. That was the one time that I could not keep going, right? For many of us, that was the first time we were forced to be seated and to be in stillness. And I had to be in stillness. And I think it brought up so many emotions that I had fought to keep down by that constant go to. When I was bored, I'd be like, I'm going back to school. I'd go get another master's degree. I have nothing to do. What certification can I get today? You know what I mean? What
can I achieve?
What can I achieve? 100%. What can I add to my list? What career can I go topple? I knew I would be good at it. And that's not ego. I just knew that I was going to achieve, because if I set my mind on something, I'm going to climb the top of that hill and get there. And at this moment, I couldn't necessarily do that in the way that I was used to doing it. So my sister finally, she read me for filth one day, my big sister, and she said, and this is something I've repeated online many times. She said, I bet you money when you have to go to the bathroom, you don't even get up and go. She said, you have to pee and you hold it. She said, you'll work through that, and your body is yelling at you and telling you that you need to do something, and you won't even do it. She said, how does that sound, that you're working past what your body inherently needs? And that was like, that just, that feeling of, she's right. I am doing everything but what my body needs,
and you have 2 children, and what that does, I mean, it's so much worse than the damage it's doing to your body, potentially the muscles around your bladder,
absolutely,
the potential for UTIs when you hold it too long, all that stuff that's to you, but your kids see this, right?
100%.
Like, and staying with a serial cheater.
Yeah.
Like, what are your kids seeing here?
Yeah.
They know what's going on.
Right. And as much as we think we're hiding things from them, I mean, my kids were very small when this happened, the demise. By the time we were divorced, they were little. I moved back from Hawaii. I think my daughter was 5 and my son was 3, but they pick up on things.
They feel it.
As much as you think you're hiding, they're picking up on the tension, and they're not speaking and slamming doors or the hushed voices behind closed doors. They're picking up on it. And I know what I grew up in. I was not repeating that pattern, not at all.
So you're sitting in quiet and you suddenly have this realization that this is okay.
Mm-hmm.
That you can be here and actually achieve within.
Yes.
What was that? What was that situation?
Oh my gosh. It was, I think again, what do I want to do? I want to research and read and learn everything that I can learn. And I think The 4 Agreements was the first book that I kind of dived into. And that just set me off on a tangent. I read that book and I read it again. And then I read it again. And then I got with my girlfriends and we read it together in a book club and underlined and highlighted. And I've read that book every year since then. And it allowed me to let go of so many thoughts and feelings that I had about myself. So many things that I believed about myself to be true that I realized were the beliefs of other people that I had just held on to since childhood. That's not me. Those things, that's not me. I'm not emotional. I'm not dramatic. That's somebody said about me when I was 7 that I've now claimed to be true for the last 30, some odd years. That's not true. And it was such a release to allow these things to be let go. I'm not just mom. You don't have to just be these things. I can want more. I'm not just a teacher. I'm not just these are titles. They could go tomorrow. And what do I have left if they're gone? If I don't build myself up internally and tomorrow, God forbid, something happens to your children or your career dies or your marriage ends. And if you have nothing beyond that, what happens? So
where's your identity sitting?
Absolutely.
So I want to come back to this moment. You're reading the 4 Agreements. Something that just came to me was when you said, and then I got together with my girlfriends and we had a book club conversation about the 4 Agreements. We started this conversation before I hit record, talking about how we build community and why. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it took you 3 or 4 years to share what you were going through with people so that you could build community that you needed. I think about a moment where I saw my own colors was when I was, I had started singing with a rock band for the first time in my life. And I was 40 years old. I've been a musician my whole life, but well, I sang in chamber singers. I was doing like 8-part harmony, alto, and 8-part harmonies all through high school and some of college. I could never imagine myself fronting a rock band. That just never occurred to me. And when I was invited, I turned them down at first. And episode 381, the previous week, that's what this is about, is my transformation into a rock singer. And what I remember in terms of my colors was that for those first 6 months or so where I was getting on stage, I felt like I was putting on a costume and a persona, that I was faking it. It was just my persona that was on stage, like an actor. This wasn't really me because it didn't feel authentic. But there was a time, and in the episode, I talk about this, where I was in a job that was really not a good fit. And we had just started working on a new song that we unveiled at a gig in this really cool old dive bar in Butte, Montana, and it's Bad Reputation by Joan Jett in the Blackhearts.
Okay.
And I remember we started it and I kind of lost my shit and got all in because I was angry. I'm being treated shitty at work. My boss is really mean to me. And I just start screaming this song. I'm singing it, but I'm screaming it. I'm feeling it. And the whole audience could feel it too. And the place was packed everywhere from 21-year-olds to 65 or 70-year-olds. It was a huge crowd, very diverse in terms of age. And I remember this moment where I finished the song and I'm out of breath, because I've been dancing, I've been singing, they're dancing with me. I turn around to catch my breath and the drummer points at me. He goes, "Now that was rock and roll." Coming from a real rock and roller, this guy had been doing it for decades, drumming, which, it's hard to drum in a rock band and not be super rock and roll. Anyway, I remember that moment because it felt like I had come home. Like, oh, this is me. I don't have to fake it. This is just another aspect of who I am.
Right. I listened to that episode and I thought it was such a, you know what? The word authentic has been its own battle. It's had its own battle over the last few years. It kind of became this rising star and then now it's kind of getting beat on. And so there's this weird feeling when that word comes up. And I remember you saying in that episode that one of your bandmates said, "You're not a rock star." And the initial feeling of hearing that from somebody it's got to cut you in the gut, right? It's got to be like, he doesn't see this in me. But as you've continued to talk, I realized, probably in the same way that you realized, that he was saying, that's not who you were meant to be. Show up as yourself. Allow yourself to show up as yourself in these moments. And I think in that moment of singing that song, you allowed yourself just to be, through your emotions, and your colors came out. And that's what shown. That's a beautiful story. And to feel that experience is beautiful. Mm-hmm.
So was there a moment where you felt really seen for your colors?
If I can be truly transparent, now is when I'm starting to feel like these moments now within the last year. The book itself is probably the most honest I've ever been, even if it's not my story. I think, and I gave it to my mother to read. I didn't tell anybody I was writing a book at all. And I gave it to her for her birthday after it was going to be published in 2 weeks. So I'm like, here you go, surprise. And so as she finished reading it, and I didn't ask her opinion on it or anything. But she was telling me that she was telling a friend about it and she referenced it and she was like, it's kind of like Lindsey's story. And I was like, no, Mom, it's not my story. It is more every woman's story,
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing about it is that we all in community can see ourselves in each other. So many of us women can see ourselves in each other. But writing this allowed me to be vulnerable. There are pieces of my story in this, but I think my story is reflective of millions of women's story because we mirror each other so well. We feel so much that's reflected. And that's why community is so important. Sharing our stories are so important because there's not one thing I've experienced that another woman hasn't somewhere, and sharing that allows us to experience the same emotion and put a voice to the feeling. and put an understanding to what we may not have said before. So I think truly right now is when I feel most colorful, allowing myself to be as I am in these moments with no apologies, allowing myself to share something deeply personal. Even if it's not my story, it's still deeply personal because it came from somewhere honest and true and loving. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I remember the first time I got a review from my book that ripped my heart out in the most positive way. And it was when somebody was describing how he was rethinking a story from his past, reframing it as a result of reading my book and doing a particular exercise in it, because my book has a bunch of exercises in it. And he said these words, "It's like 50 years of anger just melted away." And I remember I read this in tears. I was in the car with my husband. It was July 4th weekend. We had just gone camping. And this was 2020. And I just remember crying in the car and my husband saying, "What's going on? Are you okay?" And I had just gotten the signal, and that's how I saw this. And I told him what I read. And I said, if not a single other person reads my book, I'm okay with that because this is why I wrote it. Maybe it's just for this one man, but I guarantee that if he felt bad, it's not just him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, oh, okay. No matter what else comes out of this, no matter what criticisms I receive, this is what really matters.
Isn't that phenomenal how we can have a belief about ourselves and things that have happened all of our life, and in one moment it can dissipate and change our entire outlook. But and I have a son, he's 11, and sometimes he can be very internal. And I remember having a conversation with him one day and trying to get him to vocalize some of the emotions that he has instead of just sitting and, pouting. And I say to him, when you are feeling upset or if you're angry, even if it's at me, I want you to start putting words to those things, because you may think something is a certain way. And if you don't ask questions and have an understanding about it, you're going to carry this belief for the next 20 years. And you're going to have a feeling that mom didn't do something right. And you're going to be angry at me for this one thing for the next 20 years, built on something that you didn't understand or you didn't know, but you never gave me a chance to explain. And so we can carry these feelings and emotions and harbor these deep, this anger sometimes, or this hurt about something that didn't really exist. Right. I think about that sometimes, or again, creating these stories around these events, but these stories we created are solely stories. It's not fact.
It's the way we perceived an interaction.
Yes, 100%.
And regardless of intention, right? Regardless of intention.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
that completely shapes our life. The rest of our life, we're holding this,
that's huge
feeling about our parents, our siblings. Think about how many fights you got into with your sibling, if you have siblings,
I do.
You did this one time, and that impacts me for the rest of my life. And now I look at you as the sibling that did this, or the cousin that did this, or the whomever. And 30 years later, you realize that there was no truth behind it.
Or there was an aspect of truth behind it because it was your perception at the time.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that's not how they experienced it, nor was it how they intended it to be experienced.
Absolutely.
Well, and especially if you can take that step back and see the context of the story, I think a lot about a story about a woman who, when she was about 10 years old, her mom told her she wasn't very bright. She said, well, it's okay, honey, you're not very bright, but you're very sweet, so you'll marry well.
Oh, wow.
Now, this was in the 50s, late 50s. So that was not uncommon, right? To marry well and to be that's the goal. But when we took a step back and I said, tell me more about that story. I know you have repeated it over and over and over again in your head. That's what you believe, that your mom didn't think you were very bright. And so everything you do, everything you achieve is to stick it to her, See,
Right.
Mom, I am bright. Regardless of how much evidence you have that you are very bright, you still keep coming back to this needing to prove it to your mother. So let's ask, what was your mother going through at the time?
Mm.
Can you be a fly in the wall? And instead of being the participant, being injured, a little girl, 10-year-old girl sitting at the table, let's talk about your mom. What does your mom look like? So we're recreating that moment in time. And I said, is it possible that you came home with a bad math grade or something? Because you excelled in English and art. You were a creative writer, an amazing artist. Is it possible that she was really specifically talking about this one math grade? That she just decided you're not very bright because of this one math grade, regardless of all the rest of the things that you're doing well.
Right.
And what is she doing? And it came out that her mother was really disappointed in her own life, that she wanted more for herself, but that she was raising 4 kids and just didn't have room. And her sister went to college, but she didn't get to go because she was busy raising kids and taking care of their parents' business. She was a bookkeeper for the business. So we came to this conclusion that her mom might have actually been trying to protect her from her own expectations.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't mean it to injure her for the rest of her life, but that she wanted to manage her daughter's expectations because life is hard for a girl.
Yeah, don't dream too big.
Right.
Oh, wow.
So on top of this idea that you can ask, can you imagine if in that moment she said, but Mom, I got an A in English. What do you mean I'm not very bright? Look at the rest of what I'm doing. Why are you saying that? That's not very nice. Like that's my kids would be like, Mom, that's not very nice.
Right. Right.
Oh, I love that you said that to your son. I love that you said that to him because all of what you said is so powerful. We can do this with our partners too. I don't think you meant what you just said.
Right.
This really hurt me.
Right. And it's learning to vocalize. And I wish that I would have had that language as a kid. I don't know if I would have felt safe enough to use it. But now with my children, and this is a great thing, is that we can look back at our childhood and decide what worked and didn't work, and we can recreate that and re-implement. Like I said, we weren't a very emotional household, and the kind of emotion we did have was not positive. But now I say I love you probably 80 times a day. And because of it, it honestly took me a little while to get comfortable with it with my kids. I said it when they were little, and now, oh my God, they say it to me probably 30 times an hour. You know what I mean? But
I love you, Mommy. I love you, Mommy.
Yeah, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Okay. I'm like, okay. I get it, But now it's because I've created a dynamic where they feel safe in saying it. So I know I'm doing the right thing. Even with my daughter, I know she gets overwhelmed, and I would have never felt safe in that. And I've had moments where I can see her anxiety getting higher, as a 13-year-old girl, hormones go crazy. She's in middle school. Oh my gosh. And I've had moments where I could see it, and she just checks out, and I've gone in her room and we've sat on the floor together, face to face, like in Indian style, held hands. And I'm just like, breathe. We just breathe in and we breathe out, and we breathe in and we breathe out. I'm like, inhale, that would have never happened. I would have never felt safe to do that. But now I feel equipped to do that with my child and to allow her to sit in that moment. I think feeling anxious for me as a child probably would have been met with anger, because what are you angry or what are you anxious for?
I'll give you something to cry about.
Exactly. And now I can just hold space for her. I can see that she's overwhelmed. She's overstimulated right now. It's a lot going on. Like it's too many noises for her. I got to let her check out for a second, and I can just be in a room with her and breathe in and out. It's allowing us to support each other in those moments and to recreate a new dynamic for the kids that we may not have had, instead of recreating the same dynamic that we had.
Right.
And I think if I would have stayed in, my marriage, I would have played out that same story,
Wow. Wow. And that's because I think talking about community, particularly among women, is really critical I just read another article about women not supporting other women and how the majority of women experiencing bullying is coming from other women. And I'm like, holy shit, we need a new dynamic here. It's not coming from over here, but it might have when I was younger. So you get together with your friends in the 4 agreements. What was something that you remember from that conversation about 1 or 2 of the agreements and the discussion around it? But start with one of them, because we all hold on to one more than the other 3.
Oh my gosh. First of all, my girlfriends, we call each other the Sixters. And I've talked about this on my own podcast. There are 6 of us. And I don't know who came up with this, but we said Sixters. It makes sense. And these girls, these are my ride or dies. These are my go-tos. If you know the app Marco Polo, we Marco Polo each other and just check in and just to see each other's face. We all live in different places. And we also, group chat, but I've met them in different places and avenues. I was a military spouse, so I lived in different places. Some of them I met through the military. One of them I've had as a friend since I was about 19 years old. And so they're probably the only people that know more than most people about me. And I can remember reading this book together. And when we did, it was aha moment after aha moment. I think we ended up doing Zooms together and really breaking down each agreement. And the one that stood out, I think, to all of us the most was 1, being impeccable with your word. And I think I did a whole series on the podcast with them, and I had a couple of the girls on. Being impeccable with your word and don't taking anything personally. And I'll just talking about being impeccable with your word, because a lot of people assume that this means how we speak to other people, saying the right thing, not lying, but it truly is about how we speak to ourselves, the way that we speak to ourselves, the way that we describe ourselves, what we believe about ourselves. Being impeccable with your word means when you look in the mirror and you break yourself down and you say, my hips are too big, I wish my stomach was flatter, I need a boob job. That is not being impeccable with your word. How you describe yourself to yourself, that you start to believe those things. And I am a true believer of what you put out into the universe is what is sealed. It's what comes back to you. It is sealed. So after reading that, I changed the language that I used. I'm a believer in manifesting, and I'm a believer in what I say is what comes back. So I woke up, I started playing Sade, Kiss of Life, every day as I got dressed. I tell myself I am radiant, I am divine, I am loved. And it's so crazy. All of the words I started using about myself, to myself. I would go to school, like I said, I'm a teacher, and people would start describing me in the words that I was describing myself as. There was one moment she said, you are radiant right now. Who describes the word radiant?
Proof.
I'm telling you, it is proof. I remember at the time I was out, I started dating again. I went out with this one guy and he was like, your skin is like the sun is hitting you. And these are all words that I was saying about myself to myself on a daily basis. So I was like, this is just confirmation, proof, confirmation, the way that we speak ourselves. When we start to believe these things, you say it enough, you believe it. That is what's reflected. Now I'm telling myself a new story about myself. My hips aren't too big. My hips are perfect. I'm divine. What I speak impacts people. So now it's coming true. So that to me was just the game changer. And I think if anything keeps coming up between us as a group of women, between my sisters, it is that right there. How we speak to ourselves, what we say in the world matters. The story we create about ourselves and about others matters, because your word is truly, it's your most powerful thing. It truly is. It can impact other people. It can impact you. It can change lives. It can change the direction of your life. Your word is so, so powerful.
I love that. I'm holding on to this idea of using those words on myself and reminding our listeners to use the words that you want people to describe you. And it's one of the exercises I do with almost every workshop I do, almost every keynote I do, which is I ask people to write down the 3 words that they would want people to use to describe them and how they want to experience themselves. Because some people will say, well, those are two different things. I'm like, well, they need to be in alignment. They have to be the same. Otherwise, you're out of alignment. And you can't expect people to describe you one way if that's not how you are experiencing yourself.
No, absolutely.
So I love this. I want to be known as radiant.
I love it. Think about walking in the room, and that's how, well, one, I just want it to be, that's how I see, I don't care how other people see me. That's how I see myself. I show up as energy, as radiant, divine, loving energy. And the only thing that I put out is love. Like that's what I put out, is just divine energy. And I think I was having a conversation with my girlfriend the other day about just marriage in general and spouses. And sometimes we can, we find fault in our spouses. We find fault in relationships. And it's easy for us to look at our partner and say, they're not doing this, or they don't tell me that I'm this, or do you like what I'm wearing? Or why are you not saying anything about how I look today? And my question is always, well, how do you feel about how you look today? Right? How do you feel about your body right now? Your husband, your spouse, or whomever is going to be a direct reflection of the way that you feel about yourself. That's what you're putting out. You can't put it on them. It is a completely direct reflection of you and how you feel about yourself. So the work is never to fix your spouse. The work is never to, now this is if you have a healthy relationship, of course, where there's no, abuse or anything involved, but it's never to get your husband to do or your wife to do what you want them to do. The work is internal work for you to love yourself inherently the way that you are, and to realize that you are inherently worthy of love and that you are beautiful and divine in every form. That's the true work. Because when you see yourself as those things, the people around you have no choice but to see you in the way that you see yourself. That's the work. It's never to fix the other person.
And to use your words when you do have needs.
Absolutely.
I'm like listening to you going, yes, and.
Add that too.
And I say that after my husband and I just celebrated the 30th anniversary of our first date.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And our 28th wedding anniversary is around the same time. And one of the things I notice is that, yes, I am sure of myself. Even when we met when I was 25, I was sure of myself enough to know what I wanted. But many times I didn't reflect that in the words that I was using. So your word has to be impeccable about yourself, as well as letting people serve you, being able to receive. And I think that is one of the biggest benefits to creating a solid community of Sixters, or I don't know, multi-sister communities. And mine are, I have an amazing community of men and women in my life right now. I was just telling my husband yesterday, it's amazing to me how I've surrounded myself with these people that just want to help. They want to be part of something. And, but this community, you have to receive as much as you contribute. And you can't create community if people aren't contributing to it. And if you don't allow that receiving, then they're not going to continue to ask you for help. I mean, we all want to give, but it's harder to receive, right? So I was thinking about using your words, particularly when my husband and I were dating before we got engaged, and we were on a road trip, and I was hungry. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. He's like, yeah, me too. And then he drove right by the next exit. And this is on 95 going from DC, Capitol Hill, to Baltimore, to Wilmington, Delaware, which is, not a long road trip, but it's long enough that I was hungry, and it was right after work. And I said it again, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. I'm like shaky. I'm so hungry. And he's like, yeah, me too. Can't wait to get to your aunt's for dinner. And I'm sitting there getting angry and discouraged. Like, doesn't he hear me? And then I realized he can hear me, but I am not telling him what I want and what I need.
Yes.
And then the next thing, I see the sign, and it's one of those like Chesapeake Bay stops where it had all the food court and gas station stuff in the median on going north on I-95. And I was like, oh, here we go. So I said, hey, can you stop there and go through the drive-thru? I just want a burger. That's it. Just one small burger. I don't want fries. I don't want a drink. I just need something so that I'm not so hangry.
Mm.
And he's like, yeah, of course.
It's saying what you need. That is such a good story, though. That is
It's
such
so easy.
such an easy
So
thing.
easy.
That is a good story, though, because it's literally just saying out loud what you need when you need it. Yeah.
And I realize because of our conversation, the beginning of our conversation about what we grew up with,
Mm-hmm.
in my household, if I said what I needed, they'd say no.
Really?
But if I said, we should do blah, 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 or if I approached it differently, then maybe they would say yes. But if I said, I'm really hungry, can we stop for a burger? That would not happen.
And I for the group and not just for one individual, or just
I don't know. I'm thinking about that now. I'll have to ask my mom and my siblings if they had the same experience and where that maybe came from. I know that there was always the undercurrent of not having enough money. That there was, money was always an issue. That was the undercurrent in the house was there's not enough money, even though we lived like privileged middle income white people. But there was always that subterfuge, right? That underneath current. And so maybe it was part of that we didn't want to ask for things because we knew they were going to say, we don't have enough money.
Right.
I'm going to have to
process that
now that you're, thank you. Thank you. This has been so helpful. So Lindsey, let's wrap this up and come back to your book.
Yes.
Because it really is an embodiment of not just women's experience, but trauma experience and recovery, which I think is when I tell people, you don't not tell the part of your story that's the struggle. You just limit it so that it's only a small portion of the story. The rest has to be about your recovery.
Right.
The hope, the optimism, and what you can see from the other side. And that's what I love about your book is that, yes, it has those elements that we've all experienced in the struggle and trauma and pain and grief. And there's this shift that is, it's kind of a cut and dry in your book, which doesn't happen in real life. And I love the way that you present it. So tell us a little bit more about your book, where people can get it, how to follow you. And listeners, we will have all the links in the show notes associated with this podcast episode at elkinsconsulting.com.
Thank you. The book is Held by Darkness, Embraced by Light. I always want to say Found by Light for some reason. It's my own book. I don't know why I do that. But Held by Darkness, Embraced by Light. It is, I like to think of it as a love letter to any woman who has ever felt like she's carrying too much and just doesn't know how to put it down. And it's a collection of pieces. Some are reflections, some are like prayers, some are like mostly poetry, but it's really just honest moments. And I wrote it for any woman who might see herself in just one line. If there's just one line that speaks to you, or maybe a whole page, if you've questioned your worth, your voice, your place in the world, then this book is for you. I've had a couple of people that have read it, and I'll reference my sisters again. I'll get a phone call and one will say, I feel like every Black page is about me. Did you write this about me? And my response is, honestly, no Black pages are about you. But that's the reflection that they see of themselves in the book. It's because there's so many of our experiences that are in tune with each other. And you were talking about how it's broken down. It's broken down into 4 parts: darkness. And that is I won't say the lowest part, but it's the part of ourselves where we realize that there's something that we're missing. And for many of us, that could be the career change, or realizing that there's something that's on the that we're on the cusp of something. There's something that we're reaching for that we haven't got to yet. Like, I'm a mother, but there's got to be more than this. And it's okay to say that there's got to be more than this. Like, I want more for myself.
You must say this.
Yes, I want adventure. yeah, there's something that I need that I'm not receiving right now. And then past that darkness is an awakening where you realize you have to learn about yourself. You have to discover all the pieces. As we were talking about you doing that work now, you got to figure out where that came from. Where is that feeling of why couldn't I ask for just myself? Why was that not okay for me to want something for just me around a family dynamic? That's the awakening, uncovering all of those pieces of yourself. And then there's lightness. And then after that, there is balance, because we realize that it's not always just lightness. It's not always just joy. We learn to live in duality. We learn to live in experiences of pain, but we know that's balanced and that we can handle both at all times. That's the journey of going through that darkness to light to duality and existing in that space and accepting life in that space. And I'm proud of it. I really am. It's probably the most intimate thing that I've ever written, because some of the pieces actually come from journal writings, rephrased into poetry. I've read. I'm just so thankful for the words that I've received from the people that have read it. It is available on Amazon. I'm hoping to get it into larger distribution. So please, if you do read it, review it so that I can get it out there, so that it can reach more women, and so that you guys can talk about it amongst each other, amongst yourselves, and it can be a book club book, and you guys can talk about your experiences together and what you've experienced together and what made you feel something. And if anything, I just want it to be something that brings community and that allows us to have those conversations, not just with ourselves, but with our sisters, blood or not, that becomes a safe space, I
love it. Lindsey, thank you for spending this time with me. I appreciate
Oh my gosh.
it.
Thank you. You're a joy. I absolutely love being around you and talking anywhere. 2 minutes on next to a TED Talk stage or an hour here. You're phenomenal.
Thank you. Well, hopefully we'll see each other in late
We
October.
We'll see each other
early
soon.
November. I'm so looking forward to another hug.
Absolutely.
Listeners, now it's your turn. The thing that I want to ask you, you remember every time at the end of these conversations, I'm asking you to consider something for yourselves. My dear friend Nettie Owens asked me one time, what is the object, the image of yourself that you would like to hold on to? And I talked about the Hanukkah, the Jewish candelabra that we use for Hanukkah. And there's one candle that's separated from the rest. So there are 9 holders, 8 for the 8 nights of Hanukkah. And the one is the leader candle, or the shamash. That candle is the one we light first. We say the first prayer, and then we light all the other candles with that candle. And I like to think of myself as a shamash, someone who knows that by lighting other candles, I'm in no way diminishing my own light, and that when we light other candles, we bring more light. And for that brief moment where we connect, like Lindsey and I did, for 2.5 minutes, our flames were together, which make that an entwined, hyper bright flame, even for just that one moment. And it changes the dynamic and the energy in a room, guaranteed. So I'm asking you, listeners, what is your image of yourself? Just like Lindsey wants to be radiant and exudes that radiance when she owns that language, what will be yours? Thanks for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will. Remember to go to my website, elkinsconsulting.com, to learn more about Lindsey A. Lee and about how I can help you uncover your stories so that you can share meaningful moments with others, whether it's in an interview, a job interview, a date, maybe even with your family. Thanks for listening.
That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying?